Hey folks, this is Ace back again with the Baldur's Gate 3 spell tier list. In this video we'll be covering all 4th level spells in the game. If you haven't watched any of the preceding videos in this, we've just been going through level by level. I recommend checking those out, they're great videos. As always, before we dive into the spells, I just want to touch briefly on what the tiers mean. I use a 5-tier system with S being the highest. An S tier spell in my system is one that is consistently amazing. And by amazing, I mean a fight-deciding spell. S tier can also mean a spell that is meta-defining and worth building around. That's S tier. A tier is for a spell that is situationally amazing or consistently good. Likewise, B tier is for situationally good or consistently average. C tier are spells that you can mostly ignore and you won't be losing that much. They're just kind of underpowered spells. Maybe situationally they can be average. But yeah, just usually not good. Our P tier stands for roleplay tier, and this is a special tier for spells that either don't really have a use in combat or just get completely overshadowed by a competing spell, so that the only reason to cast these is for roleplay reasons. Now, roleplay reasons are valid, but my channel and this video are about tactics and optimization. So while roleplay is valid, it's not really what I'm interested in. Okay, now let's dive into the tier list, starting with Banishment. Banishment is going into A tier. Let's look at it. Okay, so this is a single target crowd control spell. However, when you upcast it, it can target additional targets. It does take your concentration. The enemies that you target with it will make a charisma saving throw, which is nice. I find charisma saving throws tend to be lower, although it is harder to debuff charisma saving throws, so there's pros and cons. If they fail that saving throw, they will be banished for 2 turns. A banished target is basically removed from the fight. They can't do anything, but you can't do anything to them. Now, this can be useful for taking out a key target so that you can clear the encounter, and then whenever they lose the banishment after 2 turns, you can focus them down with your entire team and kill them quickly. That is pretty much the use for this spell, and it is a good use for this spell. I'm not sure what else to say about it. There's a few other spells that will do this. Just as a note, though, this is an abjuration spell, which means on your abjuration wizard, you can cast this and get stacks of arcane wards, so I do like that quite a bit. But yeah, just a decent crowd control spell for this level. Next up is Blight. Blight is going into B tier. It's just a single target damage spell at range. We'll take a look at it. So here it is, Blight. You target a creature within 9 meters, they're going to make a constitution saving throw. If they fail the saving throw, they will take 8d8 necrotic damage. This will average around, I think it's 36 damage. This will average around 36 damage on a failed saving throw, and 13 on a successful one, because of course they take half damage if they succeed. For single target damage and a 4th level spell slot, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. Now, it does have this added thing where when you target plants with this spell, they'll take maximum damage and they'll have disadvantage on their saving throws, but that is a really, really niche circumstance. There aren't a lot of plants that you fight. I honestly don't think there's a single plant that I've cast this on. Mostly, I just use this for my wizards that have the Staff of Cherished Necromancy kind of as their main attack. I prefer, as I've said in previous videos, Inflict Wounds, but sometimes on a full class wizard build, you don't have Inflict Wounds, and for those builds, I just use Blight instead. I don't know, it's just kind of average damage, and average damage is pretty much always going into B tier. Next up is Confusion. This one's a very strange spell, and I haven't tested it as much as I'd like, but for now I'm going to put it into B tier. We'll look at it now. So Confusion is an enchantment spell, AoE crowd control. So targets in a 6 meter or 20 foot radius will make a wisdom saving throw. If they fail, they are confused for 3 turns. A confused target can do a variety of things. What the description says is they are hostile to everyone. On their turn, they will either wander around aimlessly, just skip their turn entirely, or kind of act normal and attack. Now, in the very little bit of testing I've done with this, I was kind of turned off from the spell because it's so unpredictable. Sometimes I'd hit a target and I'd get a lot of value out of it, and sometimes I'd hit a target and I just wouldn't. They would just keep attacking my targets like normal, and that way it's like Crown of Madness, which I talked about for my second level spell tier list, although I now don't accept the ranking I gave Crown of Madness, because Crown of Madness, whenever you hit it on a target, enemies will attack them, so that is just an amendment I'd like to make. I pinned a comment that was correcting me on that for my second level spell tier list video. And maybe I have the same problem with Confusion, like there's more use for it where enemies start attacking each other. I just haven't really had that happen that much, but like I said, I haven't tested it that much because I cast it like once or twice, didn't get a lot of use out of it, and pretty much haven't cast it since. So please let me know in the comments if you think B tier is fair for Confusion. If you've tested it extensively, I would like to hear your opinion, and I'm sure everyone else would as well. But for now, I'm happy for it being B tier just because it's unpredictable. I usually just upcast those really awesome third level crowd control spells that we discussed in our last video. I just like them better than Confusion. So moving on now to Conjure Minor Elemental. That is going into A tier. Very fun summoning spell. So with this spell, you can summon elemental creatures, and you have 3 options. You can summon one Azure, which is focused around dealing fire damage and burning targets. It has like a modified burning that does 1d10 damage instead of 1d4. That's pretty neat. So one Azure, or you can summon 2 Mephits, and they can be either Ice Mephits or Mud Mephits. In my experience, the Mephits are better than the Azure. Pretty much either one is good. I prefer Ice, but Mud definitely has some upsides. We'll just look at Ice Mephit because it's the one I've got the most use out of. So here is the stats for an Ice Mephit. Hit points 21, AC 11. It's not tanking very much, but that's kind of fine because you want it to die, as we'll see. Gets lots of abilities. For its basic attack, it gets Freezing Claws, 1d4 plus 1 slashing damage, and 2d6 cold damage if it hits. So already we're dealing cold damage, great against wet targets. It gets an Ice Breath Cone attack, 2d6 damage on a failed, I believe, Dexterity saving throw. That is nice. It can cast Chromatic Orb Cold, just like the first level spell Chromatic Orb. That is nice. But the big reason I like this summon is for its Death Burst ability. Whenever the Ice Mephit dies, or you can just choose to activate this early, it will burst and deal in, I believe, a 3-meter radius, 4d6 cold damage to all targets that fail a Dexterity saving throw, half as much if they succeed on the saving throw. And remember, you're summoning 2 of these Mephits with the cast of the spell, so even if you just use them for Death Burst, that's 8d6 cold damage and a very good targeting, right? Because you can run this directly on top of the priority target you want to hurt. And if that target is wet, that 8d6 becomes 16d6. It's actually quite a bit of damage. And that's on top of all of the other things that this summon does. So Conjure Minor Elemental, for me, is just a really good damage source for wet blasting comps. That's what I use it for. And of course, it has all the other advantages that summons get. They can draw aggro, and in this case, drawing an aggro on your Mephit, if they die, you wanted them to die anyways, so I kind of like that. But even though Conjure Minor Elemental is so good, it's actually kind of dwarfed by the other big Druid summon spell at this level, which is Conjure Woodland Being. Conjure Woodland Being is going into S tier easily. It might be the best spell at this level. Let's take a look at it. So Conjure Woodland Being will summon a Dryad, which fights alongside you until your next long rest, or until it dies, of course. But you really want to keep this Dryad alive because just how amazing it is. This Dryad gets just a ton of insane abilities. It's so overloaded. First off, let's talk about Spike Growth. Dryads can cast Spike Growth. They can cast this without a spell slot resource. And then the fact that there's a summon means they bring their own concentration save. So you're basically getting a concentration-free, spell slot-free Spike Growth. You can cast infinite times as long as the Dryad is alive. amazing. Spike Growth is an incredible spell. It's a spell worth building around. I talked about it in my second level spell tier list. I gave it an S tier, so you can hear my thoughts on the spell there. But already this is enough to put the Dryad at S tier, and it also gets some other incredible things. The next big one to talk about is its Nature Step ability. This is an aura. I'm not sure how far the aura is, to be honest. But allies in that aura will be immune to difficult terrain, including the entangling terrain you can summon with the Dryad. They cannot be restrained or paralyzed. So this is like an aura version of another spell we'll talk about at this level, which is Freedom of Movement. But being immune to paralyzed, amazing. Paralyze can totally ruin your day. So yeah, immunity to that, incredible. And then they also gain resistance to poison damage. That's decent, I guess. But it's getting all of that for free in an aura. So that's the second big thing it gets. The third big thing it gets is its Fallen Lover ability, which allows it to summon for itself a Woodwoad. So yeah, you're hearing that right. This is a summon that can summon its own summon. Here is the Woodwoad. It's the same stats as the Woodwoads that you fight in Act 1. 42 hit points, 18 AC actually makes it fairly tanky, and that's the big thing you want to do with this. It also heals when it's standing on vine surfaces. It will heal a little bit of passive healing every round. So, I mean, this is basically a tank creature. You're not summoning it for damage. You're just summoning it to tank for your Dryad. So, yeah, those are the three big things. But the Dryad also gets Shillelagh, but its Shillelagh actually deals 4 die 8 bludgeoning damage, so it can do quite a bit of damage on top of all of the damage that the Woodwoad is doing over a long rest period. That really adds up. And oh, by the way, Fallen Lover is a once per short rest cast. So if your Woodwoad dies, but your Dryad stays alive, you can summon another one after your next short rest. I mean, this spell is insane. For what it gives you at this spell level, absolutely incredible. So the only reason I don't cast a spell is I just don't like micromanaging the Dryad and the Woodwoad. I mean, it's turn-based, so it's not really like requiring a lot of attention. It just feels tedious to me. But yeah, the spell is incredible. It deserves S tier. I think it'll probably be the best spell at this level. Next up is Death Ward. Death Ward, I'm going to put it into C tier. I just cannot really be bothered casting this spell. Let's look at it. So here we go. Death Ward. You cast this on a target, concentration free until their next long rest. They have the Death Ward condition. When they have this, if they are ever reduced to 0 hit points, it will be consumed and they remain conscious with 1 hit point left. So this is going to tank 1 instance of damage for you. It's action economy free, so you're eating up an attack, and that's good, but for a 4th level spell, it's just a hard pass for me. I think you can ignore this and you're not losing that much, so perfect for C tier. Dimension Door is next. I'm going to put Dimension Door into B tier. Dimension Door is like a 2-person version of Misty Step. It's not a bonus action, though. On an action, you can teleport yourself and an adjacent ally as far as you can see. And there's some fights where this is good, but most of the time, you probably just want to be using Misty Step or Jump or something like that. Yeah, I'm putting in B tier for situationally good. In those situations where fights are very spread out, this can be good to get a target out of danger or to get a target in a position to attack a priority enemy. I have used Dimension Door more than once in the... Is it the last one? No, it's the second to last encounter of the game where you're fighting in an area that's being bombarded and sometimes I have to teleport an ally out of a bomb area. It's good for that. Yeah, situationally good for Dimension Door. I don't think we need to say anything else about it. Next up, Dominate Beast. C tier. Man, I almost feel like this deserves RP tier, but I guess there is like one fight maybe that I can think of where this could be decent. Dominate Beast, you cast this on a single target that is a beast type. They will make a wisdom saving throw. If they fail, they are dominated for 10 turns or for as long as you maintain concentration. A dominated creature swaps allegiances, so it starts fighting for you, but you do not control it. It's just going to take its turns randomly. It would be really nice if enemies would attack the dominated person, but in my limited tests of this, that hasn't happened for me. I find that they tend to ignore the dominated character, but you do get them on your side. I mean, taking a turn from the enemy and making it a turn for you is a big swing, right? Like it's like a +2 turn as far as action economy goes, because you're taking a -1 and you're turning it into a +1. The reason this is C tier is not because of Dominate. Dominate is a good condition. It's the fact that this can only affect beasts. And there's just no really big beast fights in this game. I'm sorry to say it, yeah. The one fight I know of is in Act 3, where in a special zone, you will fight some like raptor-style dinosaurs. It's not even a hard fight, to be honest. But those are the only high-level beasts I can think of. Everything else is low-level. So by the time you get this, it's already pretty much useless. That's why I was thinking RP tier. But yeah, I don't want to rule it out as useless. Because, yeah, I might just be forgetting something. But I don't think anyone will disagree with me that this is so niche that it deserves C tier. That takes us to Evard's Black Tentacles, also B tier. Evard's Black Tentacles is like a way cooler Entangle spell. It's like Entangle. In a 6 meter, 20 foot radius, you're going to summon difficult terrain. But instead of vines, these are like these creepy Lovecraftian tentacles. Enemies, actually all creatures, you, allies, and enemies, when they are in the area, will make a strength saving throw. If they fail, they will take 3d6 bludgeoning damage on top of having their movement speed halved just from it being difficult terrain. 3d6 bludgeoning damage, not amazing, not terrible either. The problem is that I find that this is really, really buggy. Yeah, sometimes creatures will fail their save and they won't take damage, and I just don't know why. I cannot figure out why. I mean, truthfully, in a world with spells like Spike Growth, which is also difficult terrain that deals damage, this is probably RP tier. But like, if you get it as like a scroll or something like that, yeah, I mean, the effect isn't terrible. I mean, for the spell level, the effect's pretty terrible. You know what? I'm talking myself into it. Let's downgrade this to C tier for Evard's Black Tentacles. Next up is Fire Shield. I'm putting Fire Shield in A tier. I like this spell quite a bit. So Fire Shield is one of those spells that's 2 spells in 1. Both of them will be a self buff that will give you resistance to a damage type and also retaliation damage. Let's look at Fire Shield Warm as an example. So, Fire Shield Warm, when you cast this on yourself, for 10 turns concentration free, you're going to have resistance to all cold damage, and when enemies attack you, as retaliation, they will take 2d8 fire damage, no save, no attack roll. It's just if they hit you with an attack, they take that fire damage. You also shed light. Fire Shield Chill is the opposite. You have resistance to fire damage, and you will deal 2d8 cold damage. This is probably the better variant. Fire is slightly more common as a damage type, and cold is way more valuable as this damage type for you. So this is the one I use the most. Anyways, retaliation damage is always, always, always good because it's completely action economy breaking. You're just dealing damage with no action economy investment. In fact, they are spending their action for you to deal damage to them. Incredible. Of course, you have to take aggro to utilize this, but you can make a build around mitigating damage with the Abjuration Wizard, for example. And now you're barely taking any damage, and they can just kill themselves attacking you. Amazing. It's kind of a spell worth building around, but honestly, this isn't even the best retaliation damage spell. Yeah, there are other better ones, especially for how much of a spell slot investment this is, but it's definitely good. It deserves A tier, I think. Probably high end of A tier for this one. Next up, Freedom of movement. Freedom of movement goes into A tier. And this should just tell you how good Conjure Woodland Being is, because the Dryad gets this spell as like an aura. So here's Freedom of Movement. You can cast this on an ally who's stunned, and it will end the stun. Also, you can cast this on an ally concentration free until their next long rest. They are immune to difficult terrain, being paralyzed, and being restrained. Yeah, it's kind of action economy free because you're casting this as soon as you're done resting as like a pre-buff. And your targets are immune to being restrained, paralyzed, and to difficult terrain. I mean, it's the paralyzed one in particular. Paralyzed can totally ruin your day. It can ruin your encounter. So with this spell, just casting that on all your allies, getting immunity to it, is definitely good. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about it. I think we can just move on now to Grasping Vine. Grasping Vine is going into RP tier. This might be the worst spell in the game in my mind. It's so terrible. I just feel like I must be missing something about it. But I cannot see what it is. It just seems so bad to me. Let's look at it. So this is a Druid spell or Nature Domain Cleric spell. It's a summon. You're going to summon a Vine. This Vine has an armor class of 10, and it has 6 hit points. Its stats are terrible. It can do one thing, which is pull a target towards it 6 meters or 20 feet. If they fail a saving throw, I believe it's a strength saving throw. The DC is not even that high. The pull has a range of 9 meters. And yeah, the spell is a concentration spell. This spell would be average if it was a first level spell. The fact that this is a 4th level spell slot for this terrible summon, existing in the same kit as Conjure Woodland Being, one of the best summons in the game. I mean, this is abysmal. This is so bad. It's so bad. I cast this once, thankfully, as a scroll, just to test it in the Last Light Infight. And I've done a bit of testing since then, and I still cannot see a use for it. So, congratulations, guys. We have just encountered the worst spell in Baldur's Gate 3. Next up, Greater Invisibility. Greater Invisibility is an S tier spell, in my opinion. We'll take a look. So, this is the, as the name implies, the improved version of the Invisibility spell. You cast this on an ally, and they are invisible for 10 turns, or as long as you maintain concentration. What makes it improved is that the invisible target, whenever they attack, it now no longer breaks invisibility, at least automatically. What happens is each time you attack or take some kind of offensive action, you are going to make a stealth check to see if you can maintain the invisibility. The DC on the stealth check starts at 15. The next stealth check will go up to 17, and then it will go up by 1 per check. Now, on a standard run, this isn't that good. It's like a 4th level spell, and you're probably not going to get that much more than a standard invisibility for it. However, this is totally S tier because you can build around it. If you build a character that is very good at making stealth checks, you can start going entire fights just attacking with advantage, full attacks, and never being targeted because you stay invisible the entire time. And once you got it at that level, it's quite good. Basically, the tactics are combine this with anyone who can get expertise stealth will really help you pass the stealth checks. And then you can combine it with the plus 10 that you get from Pass Without a Trace. Once you've layered these spells, basically you can just build a glass cannon character, cast this on them. They can attack with advantage on every target. Really great for rogues, because now they're proccing sneak attack every round consistently, and they're never taking any aggro. Incredible. I also imagine this would be really good in a solo run. Of course, I don't factor in soloing into these tier lists, but yeah, just a good spell. Worth building around for sure. Next up, Guardian of Faith. Guardian of Faith is going into A tier for me. Probably here. Guardian of Faith is kind of like a summon. You're going to summon like a cool statue thing. It cannot move. It just remains stationary. And on its turns, it will attack a enemy, and its attacks will always deal 20 radiant damage, but it will also hurt itself for 20 radiant damage. It has 60 hit points. Once its hit points get down to 0, that is the end of this spell. However, if enemies move through its area, it has like a 2-3 meter area, it will attack them automatically. If a target attacks an ally within the area of Guardian of Faith, the Guardian of Faith will attack like a reaction attack on it. So it's just a really consistent way to get radiant damage. It's concentration free. It's going to deal pretty consistently 60 damage for this cast, and it controls an area, a zone. So yeah, that's really what it's doing. Definitely good for clerics who are looking to deal damage, but they're spending their concentration on Spirit Guardians. This is always a consistent way to deal decent damage. So next up, Ice Storm. I'm putting Ice Storm in A tier as well, probably the high end of A tier. So Ice Storm is an AoE damage spell and also kind of zone control spell. You cast this in a 6 meter 20 feet radius. All allies will make a dexterity saving throw or take 2d8 bludgeoning damage, and they'll also make a dexterity saving throw or take 4d6 cold damage. I'm actually not sure if it groups the dexterity saving throws. I haven't looked at that in my tests. Either way, you can see there's split kinds of damage, but half of it is cold. So that's awesome. You can double this against wet targets. And then on top of that, it will create an ice surface that lasts 2 turns. This is identical to the spell Sleet Storm, which we covered in the last video, 3rd level spells, except it's lasting 2 turns instead of 10, but it's concentration free. There is a time when you'll want to cast Sleet Storm, and there's a time when you will want to cast Ice Storm. They're both good. Yeah, just the fact that you can kind of get like a Sleet Storm effect concentration free is pretty neat. It's also dealing some damage. That's good. As you can probably tell, 4th level spells are barely better than 3rd level spells. Yeah, if you're feeling a little underwhelmed for the spell level, you're not the only one. Moving on now to Otiluke's Resilient Sphere. I'm going to put this one into A tier as well, right around Banishment, because they're basically the same spell to me. Otiluke's Resilient Sphere, you cast this on an enemy or an ally. If it's cast on an enemy, they will make a dexterity saving throw. If they fail for 3 turns, they are enclosed in an arcane sphere. Their movement speed is halved. All incoming damage is blocked. All outgoing damage is blocked. This lasts 3 turns or until they maintain concentration. So you can use this to kind of zone off an enemy like Banishment. However, if they're concentrating on spells or something like that, those effects still last as far as I know. So it's probably a more defensive-oriented version of Banishment, but you can pretty much get the same effects, so I'm just keeping them in the same tier, A tier for that. That brings us to Phantasmal Killer. Phantasmal Killer is a B tier spell, probably put there. This is kind of the upgraded version of Phantasmal Force, the 2nd level spell. It's a single target spell. The target you cast it on will make a Wisdom saving throw. If they fail for 10 turns, they have the Phantasmal Killer condition. At the beginning of each of their turns that they have this condition, they will take 4d10 psychic damage. I think they get a Wisdom saving throw to resist that. I should have retested this before I filmed it, but my memory is that they make a Wisdom saving throw for half damage each turn, something like that. They will also have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Upcasting the spell adds 1d10 psychic damage. So just like Phantasmal Force, damage over time isn't really a preferred strategy in Baldur's Gate 3. This is a game where encounters go extremely quickly. They're usually decided in 3 to 4 turns. Not ended, but decided. So the dominant strategy is just dealing as much damage as you can, as quickly as you can. But 4d10 damage per round is actually kind of decent. I believe that will average around 21, 22 damage to the target. And over a few rounds, that really does add up. So if you're fighting some of those bulkier bosses, this is worth casting on them. It's good for that. It also gives them disadvantage on their attack rolls. That really helps. Yeah, so there's situations where this can be good. So B tier for Phantasmal Killer. Next up, this spell is called Staggering Smite. I'm putting into RP tier. No, it's definitely better than Grasping Vine. I mean, worlds better than Grasping Vine, but still RP tier, I think. The reason I am uncertain about this spell is because I don't think I've ever cast it. I didn't know this was in the game until I was going through the lists on the wiki. Because, as you can see under how to learn, it doesn't tell us who can learn this. And Smite spells are usually Paladin exclusive spells. But this is a 4th level spell. And Paladins in this game can't get 4th level spells. So maybe Bards can learn it with Magical Secrets, but I don't remember seeing this in the Magical Secrets list. Either way, I would never learn this, because it's just a worse version of Wrathful Smite. It's dealing 4d6 psychic damage, and if the target fails a Wisdom saving throw for 1 turn, they are staggered. A staggered target has disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and cannot take reactions. It's just bad. It's not a good Smite spell. So, RP tier for Staggering Smite. That brings us to Stoneskin. Stoneskin's also going into RP tier.
Look how they massacred my boy.
I'm just so disappointed with the spell, guys. I mean, Stoneskin in the original Baldur's Gate game, it was iconic. It was powerful. You cast that on every wizard. It was awesome. And for decades, for generations of D&D players, Stoneskin was the go-to defensive spell for wizards. And now in 5th edition and in Baldur's Gate 3, it's just bad. Here's what it does. You cast this on a target, either you or an ally. It's a concentration spell. It lasts until your next long rest. For as long as it lasts, you will have resistance to all non-magical physical damage. I mean, just don't. Cast Warding Bond instead. It's a 1st level spell. It does everything this does, but better. I mean, this is a 4th level spell, guys. It's RP tier. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it. I'm so crushed by how terrible this spell is. So bad. So bad. Okay, next up is Wait, hold on. Where's Polymorph? Polymorph didn't show up on my my tier list. Huh, that's funny. Yeah, it didn't import. Anyways, here's Polymorph, guys. I'm putting Polymorph into C tier, but it's a tentative C tier, because I have an instinct that if I really think hard about the spell, I could find some really cool uses for it. But so far, I haven't found some really cool uses for it. I haven't talked to anyone who's found cool uses for it. So far, the consensus has been that it's kind of an underwhelming spell. This is a single target crowd control spell. The target will make a Wisdom saving throw. If they fail, they are polymorphed for 5 turns, which means they are turned into a sheep. In post, I'm going to add the stats of the sheep. Here they are. The cool thing is that they have 3 hit points. If they are ever reduced to 0 hit points, the condition ends and they just go back to normal. There is overflow damage, though. So you don't actually want to hurt them while they are polymorphed, because when they're a sheep, they basically don't do anything. But any kind of stray AoE damage will probably end the condition on them. The big use that I can think of this is to debuff saving throws, right? Polymorph a target to debuff its Wisdom saving throw, then cast Hold Monster on it, and profit that way. The other thing is that, in theory, a sheep is a beast, right? So maybe you could start using the beast targeting spells on the creature. Haven't really experimented with that much yet. But all of those are reasons why I think it could be good. But yeah, just as a straight-up crowd control spell, you're better off just casting other spells, like some of the amazing spells we covered in the last video. And that brings us to Wall of Fire, the last spell on our list. Wall of Fire is going into A tier, probably around here. So Wall of Fire will summon in a straight line a wall. Enemies in that area, so here's the area. It's a 36-meter line, and the width of the line is probably 3 meters, I would say. Yeah, probably around 3 meters, 10 feet-ish. Enemies in that area will have to make a dexterity saving throw or take 5d8 fire damage, and that can definitely add up. They also automatically get the burning condition So they'll take 1d4 fire damage for the next 2 turns. The damage isn't a lot, however, a guaranteed burning does really work if you're using the fire elementals with the 5th level spell Conjure Elemental. They really want to exploit the burning condition. I mean, basically you can kind of build a comp around the burning condition. It's not as good as most comps, but it works. So Wallfire is great for that, but just as a damage source, it's also pretty good. Now, I still prefer to upcast some of the other persistent damage source spells, like Cloud of Daggers, like a Moonbeam, but yeah, this is good. It's damage in a large AoE, solid A tier, persistent damage in a large AoE. I think that's solidly A tier, especially for this spell level. As you can see, there's not a lot of great spells in this level. A lot of them are underwhelming. Compared to the jump that we got from 2nd level to 3rd, the jump from 3rd to 4th is basically non-existent. 3rd and 4th level spells kind of just feel like the same power level to me. But anyways, guys, that is it for this tier list. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will catch you next time.